What do the Lone Ranger, the Mandalorian, and Jesus have in common?
Weapons are part of my religion.
No, it's not the guns. Welcome back to Bible Paladin, Reading Between the Lines. And I've really been excited about recording this episode because we'll be talking about a popular television trope that you might be surprised to recognize in the Gospel of Mark. If you're a bit older than me, you might be familiar with The Lone Ranger or The Fugitive. Or perhaps, if my age, you enjoy reruns of The Incredible Hulk. Maybe your mom was hooked on Highway to Heaven, or you followed the adventures of The A-Team. And one of the most recent entries is my personal favorite, The Mandalorian, particularly Season 1.
This is the way.
All of these series have their own take on the mysterious stranger archetype. And so we'll be looking at three aspects of this particular theme. The wanderer, who goes from place to place doing good deeds. The hero, who helps those in need and fights against injustice. The masked drifter, who conceals his identity, usually on the run from some law or authority. It usually is one person, but they often have a partner or a confidant, or even a team can act as the protagonist. You put all these together and you not only have a compelling story, but you also have something that is surprisingly relatable. The wanderer.
I don't belong here.
The wanderer, who has no place to rest his head, can make for a great series, because each episode can have its own story and setting, whether it be a time, place, or planet. And our hero meets different people at each place, and intervenes to help them in some way.
Make the world a better place?
Eventually, he becomes well known for his brave deeds, which gives him all the more reason to pack up and leave town for somewhere else. The Gospel of Mark tells the story of Jesus in a very similar fashion. He transitions these journeys by telling us that Jesus crosses the lake, or arrives in this town, or is walking towards this area, and we have the encounters in each of these areas, mostly in the form of exorcisms and healings, each with different individuals or families. But there are also lessons and parables in which the audience gets a moral teaching, which was quite common in many of these older series. And like the parables, the writers were able to tell these lessons or morals much more implicitly than explicitly. You had to connect the dots, which is unlike many of the shows today, which kind of hit you over the head with what they want to teach you. The hero.
His face masked, his true name unknown, appearing out of nowhere to strike down injustice or outlawry, and then vanishing as mysteriously as he came.
One thing that allows these shows to be entertaining is the conflict, and that's why there tends to be quite a bit of violence in them. The hero needs enemies to defeat and to show his moral high ground, and the enemies are there to try to thwart him as he attempts to help those who are in need. And they are typically really bad dudes. They are outlaws and murderers, bounty hunters, and corrupt robber barons. They're the type of people that you don't feel bad for when they are knocked out or eliminated.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
So how is Jesus in Mark's gospel like this vigilante? I mean, he's quite well known for being a pacifist. He wasn't the military messiah that many of them were expecting. Well, the enemies that Jesus is defeating are impure spirits. And who doesn't like to see demons get beaten? Right at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, he is confronted by Satan. And this battle really continues throughout the whole gospel. In fact, Jesus performs more exorcisms in the Gospel of Mark than in the entire Bible put together. We have three major specific stories of exorcisms, one which includes a whole legion of devils, but also a number of passages that simply tell us that Jesus or his disciples were driving out demons. And these spirits also represent sin, darkness, and the rejection of God. So all of these battles really are leading up to that final conflict in which Jesus conquers everything that they represent. The masked drifter.
10 years ago, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground.
Now, the audience may be well aware of the identity of the stranger. In fact, it may be in the introduction of the show itself. But our hero will often wear a mask, have a secret identity, or change his appearance throughout the show. He may reveal who he is to a particular ally or close friend, but most people will be unaware.
He will wear the mask until there is no longer any need for it.
But why the secret identity? Well, typically there will be people who are antagonistic towards our hero, but they're not necessarily bad people. There may be a misunderstanding, or they believe our hero to be guilty when he is in fact innocent.
Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune.
Or they may not understand our hero's condition. Or the drifter simply does not want his identity known to protect a greater secret or those close to him. Another characteristic that is common but not necessary is that often the hero has a particular supernatural power or specialized skills, and this is often connected to their secret identity. If they don't have a power, they are typically the best at what they do, which makes them even more popular with the common man and more threatening to the bad guys. Obviously, Jesus has supernatural powers, but how else does he fall into this mysterious drifter archetype? You might say, well, he doesn't wear a mask or have a secret identity. Well, he doesn't wear a mask. He is truly human. I don't want to fall into heresy here, but he does have a secret identity. Mark begins his gospel by saying that this is the beginning of the gospel about the Christ, the Son of God. That's a secret identity. I mean, everyone knows him as Yeshua, Bar Yosef, Jesus, son of Joseph, from that backwater city of Nazareth. In fact, when the demons call out his true identity, he rebukes and silences them. When he miraculously heals someone, he tells them not to tell anyone. When Peter confesses his faith that Jesus is the Messiah, he commands him not to let anyone know. And after the transfiguration, Jesus tells the witnesses to not tell anyone about it until after the resurrection. In fact, this is so common in Mark's gospel that scholars have called it the messianic secret. And like the mysterious strangers in popular culture, Jesus also has run-ins with the authorities, who eventually do arrest him. Here it begins with the Pharisees and scribes, the teachers of the law. Again, not evil people, but misguided and unwilling to see the truth. That's why Jesus does not reveal himself to them. He must wait for the opportune time. And in fact, the last few chapters of Mark's gospel really act as kind of a season finale in which Jesus does finally confront them. So we have this comparison between Jesus and this popular media trope. But what's the point? How is this relatable to most of us? And why do we like these shows? The way I see it, TV shows or stories are both an escape and a means to explore something about ourselves. This can be said about story-driven games, too. One of my favorite older video games is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. It's a Star Wars RPG, and the main character also follows this archetype. In fact, early on in the game, he is given the nickname the Mysterious Stranger, because his past is shrouded in mystery. And then throughout the game, you travel from planet to planet, defeating bad guys and helping others. Well, if you choose the light side. And that's another reason why I bring up this game. You are given choices throughout the game, which determine the direction it goes and who you end up as. Our lives are actually much more similar to these stories than we may realize. And so perhaps we don't travel to various physical locations throughout our life, but we do travel from place to place in the different episodes of our lives. We begin as a son or daughter, brother or sister. We experience life where we live and navigate the choices we make. Then we go to school and must deal with new people and situations, friends and bullies. We may go to more schools and enter into more relationships. We may have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and that is certainly a whole new territory with its own battles. We get jobs and meet new people, go to other schools or college and other locations, get married, pursue a career. And believe me, raising a family is a whole nother adventure altogether. But this wanderer aspect is just simply that part of our lives that we realize is a journey. And on this journey, we meet people on the way, hundreds of people. How do we treat them? No doubt we've come across all sorts of authority figures who probably mean well, but can make our lives unnecessarily difficult. Some we fight against, and even do so to protect others when we see injustice or abuses of power. But in general, we might ask ourselves, do I make a difference? I mean, unless you are in the medical profession or a first responder or a police officer, you may not be literally saving lives or beating up bad guys, but maybe deep down you feel like you are making a difference. How are you treating the people that you meet, your friends, family members, just someone on the street? What are we doing to make a difference? And maybe it's just me, but I imagine every once in a while how I might act in a real life or death situation. Of course, I want to be the action hero, but perhaps we do so in our own ways. I mean, I like to think I'm a hero to my son. And while we strive to be the hero and help others, we also do have to defeat the bad guys in our lives. And I don't mean the real flesh and blood villains, but those things that could lead us to the dark side.
Join me.
That's why I think we may even relate better to the story of Jesus and the demons that he fought. Mark calls these demons often impure spirits. And when Jesus talks about the things that can make a person impure, this is what he says. What comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. These are the demons that we struggle with and fight with. Yeah, it's fun to see our hero defeat the baddies in whatever way fits his style, but half the time, these fights point to something much deeper. We don't have to look too far to confront the forces of evil, but the fact is, it sure does feel good when we do overcome them. What about the secret identity? The more I thought about it, the more intriguing this concept became. In the gospel, Jesus calls the Pharisees, in a negative sense, hypocrites. And the word means an actor, someone who is playing someone other than themselves. Greek actors often wore masks. I think there are two types of masks that we wear, both good and bad. Bad masks are the ones that we wear to conceal our fear or shame or even pride. We wear them in various situations in our lives. We may wear them when we're trying to make a good impression or we're dating someone for the first time. But we also wear them to protect ourselves or for fear of how others might think about us. Or even when we are acting like hypocrites and we are betraying what we really believe to be good and true. But the fact is, we wear both kinds of masks. Jesus did keep his identity secret for good reason. He was always known to his Father, God, and he gradually revealed himself, first for those closest to him, and eventually to all who would accept and believe in him. But for those who could not understand or who were unwilling to understand, Jesus did not show who he truly was, at least not until the very end. And sometimes we do wear masks to protect ourselves or to protect others, and that's not always a bad thing. But like Jesus, there are times in which we do have to remove our mask and become vulnerable.
You are redeemed. This is the way.
This is the way.
Throughout the Bible, marriage is often used as a metaphor to talk about the relationship between God and his people. And I think that is quite a beautiful metaphor because within marriage, it is necessary to eventually remove the mask. Yeah, at the beginning, we have all sorts of barriers between us and whatever that relationship might look like. There are things that we keep hidden, but eventually, those barriers must come tumbling down. The story of Adam and Eve shows this so beautifully. They were called one flesh by God when they were brought together in Eden. But once they sinned, the first thing that they did was find themselves to cover themselves with, because suddenly they were ashamed of their nakedness. And so nakedness was symbolic for being open, being able to give oneself fully to the other. So now they were no longer comfortable with each other or with God. And marriage also shows us as a symbol of being fully open to each other. And whether we're talking metaphorically or physically, it is sometimes very difficult to do. To be there without shame, without self-consciousness, to give oneself fully to the other person. And yet this is also how we are supposed to be before God. I think it's important to develop a relationship with the Lord that requires no mask, no pretense, no hiding. God already knows us through and through, and so that mask is really only for us. It might make us feel more comfortable, but in reality it creates a barrier between us and God. And once we can remove that mask, it's amazing how healing our prayer experience can really be. When we look at the gospel, we can see how Jesus really gives us this example of being completely open with God. We can see this in his prayer at Gethsemane. Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." But Jesus also gives himself completely to us. Just as in the Old Testament there is that image of marriage between God and his people, the same exists in the New Testament. Jesus is called the groom, and his bride is the church, or the people of God. Now, for obvious reasons, our images of the crucifixion don't show this, but Jesus would have been stripped naked when he was crucified. Yes, an uncomfortable yet powerful image. Just like Adam before the fall, man is now fully restored. Before any radio or television show, Jesus was the original mysterious stranger. He was the one who defeated evil and saved the day. And even now, we are still captivated by such an experience. And whether we can see Jesus or recognize this message, we may just see them as entertainment. But ultimately, we want to get to know this mysterious stranger. We want to get to know Jesus because he's the one that can lead us to a place that is beyond our imagination. Thank you so much for joining me on this little detour. And if you're enjoying this content, please subscribe and like and share your thoughts below. Until next time, enjoy the journey, and God bless.